3 robbers put on masks to rob a bank, and the boy in charge of receiving them did not panic at all, but even listened to music and got high. When he saw that his companions had one, he immediately lowered the handbrake. Once everyone was in the car, it was time for him to perform. The boy's name is Paul and he's a top driver. Faced with the police in hot pursuit, he steered hard and used the caravan as cover to escape. Then a truck suddenly appeared and he made a cool drift to avoid it, and his companions were amazed by his maneuvers. But soon there were more police cars following and a barrier was set up ahead. Paul swerves into the opposite lane again and is able to escape from the police. Then they arrived at a designated spot, switched to another car and fled. Paul's parents died when he was a child and he was raised by his uncle. His main hobbies were racing and listening to music. When they got back to the headquarters, their boss, Carter, split the money equally. Carter was very discreet and never took part in the robberies himself, but only planned them from behind the scenes, arranging 3 people at random. Paul was mainly responsible for the pickup because he had stolen Carter's car 5 years ago and crushed it into scrap metal, causing damage to an important shipment inside. So he had been working as a chauffeur to pay off his debts for the past 5 years. But every time he completes a job, Carter gives him $10,000 as a reward. Now, with one more job, he can pay off all his debts. He hides the money under the floorboards of his house for future use. He also keeps a recording of every job he does, but he doesn't do it for evidence. He does it to make music for his own enjoyment. One day Paul was eating at a restaurant when he was struck by a beautiful waitress, Anna. After a conversation, he learned that they both had a passion for music. Paul's humor made Anna laugh and he felt in love. When he got back, he told his uncle the good news and suddenly the phone rang. The caller was Carter, who informed Paul that he was ready for his last job. Paul immediately returned to the headquarters. This time Carter changed the group of people tasked with the target is a money truck. Paul was listening to music and tapping his fingers on the table. David was upset because he didn't think Paul was listening to the plan and who would be responsible if something went wrong. But Paul repeated Carter's words in their entirety. It turned out he could read lips, so David had nothing to say. By late afternoon, the operation had officially begun. 3 robbers donned hoods and headed straight for the money truck in front of them. Paul was entertaining himself as usual. After the robbery, the robbers quickly got into their car. Everything was going well, but as soon as they pulled out, they were hit by a pickup truck. A plainclothes cop pulled out a gun and fired. Paul didn't wait to get away. He turned around in the same spot and knocked over the pursuing escort with his cart, but the pickup was blocked again. He swerved and drove the car up a slope, thus avoiding the pursuit. Then he pulled onto the highway, but the pickup followed him again, and David was so angry that he tried to shoot, but he was hit instead. He lost control of the car and drove into the bottom of the truck. Luckily, Paul was able to get the car out in time and broke through the guardrail and down the slope to the road below. The plainclothes policeman followed suit, but his driving skills were terrible, and the pickup truck rolled over, allowing Paul and the others to escape. After the last job, Carter kept his promise and gave him $10,000 to live his life the way he wanted to. Paul found Anna and told her he loved her. Anna already had a crush on him, and they got together. Then he got a job as a delivery boy and said goodbye to his old self. That day, he went on his first date with Anna and they went to a nice restaurant to enjoy the moment. But Carter found him again. Paul was afraid that Anna would find out about his past, so he followed her out. Carter wanted him to help him again because he couldn't find a better driver than Paul. Paul didn't want to say yes, but Carter threatened him with the lives of Anna and his uncle. In the end, Paul had to give in. The next day Carter took him to the post office and told him the target was a post office money order and then arranged for him to go inside. Paul was a little nervous, but he memorized the location of the surveillance cameras and the number of guards. When he got back, he realized that there was a new group of robbers. This time it was Mr. and Mrs. Longhair and David. Carter laid out a detailed plan of action. That night, the group planned to go out for a bite to eat, and they went to the restaurant where Anna worked. Paul could only pretend that he didn't recognize the smart Anna and didn't say hello, but David saw something in the way they looked at each other. He drew his gun and was about to kill Anna, but Paul stopped him in time. But Paul was able to stop him. He saw that he had Anna's attention, so David gave up. The next day, the operation began. The 3 of them went in to rob the post office, and Paul waited outside. A woman came to work at the post office. He shook his head and told her not to go in. The woman ran away, but he just turned his head and they called the After robbing the post office, the robber raised his hand and killed the policeman at the door. Paul was furious at David's brutality. Several people urged him to leave quickly. He accelerated into the truck in front of him. David was pierced by a steel bar, killing him instantly. Furious, Longhair asked him what he wanted, but by then the police had arrived and a fierce exchange of gunfire ensued, and Paul took advantage of the situation to escape. During the fight, Spear's wife was beaten to a pulp, so Spear took out his anger on the police. On the other hand, Paul returned home and took all the money he had saved over the years and stuffed it into his uncle's arms, then sent him to a nursing home. Then he went to the restaurant where Anna was working to take her away with him. He didn't realize that Shaggy was waiting again to make Paul feel the pain of losing the love of his life. Then a policeman appeared in the restaurant to use the restroom. While Shaggy was distracted, Paul shot him in the face and left with Anna. The 2 of them went to Carter's lair to exchange the money order for money and run. Although Carter had been using Paul, he didn't want to see him die. Just as Paul got the money and was about to leave, A police car suddenly drove up slowly and the person in the car was Long Hair. Carter rushed to shoot but Long Hair killed him on the spot. Paul and Anna got into the car and ran away. Long Hair wouldn't let him go so easily, but he forgot that Paul is a top driver. No matter how he cannot catch up with each other, but also accidentally crashed into a car. At the end of the story, Paul and Anna drove away to start a new life in another city. And that's the end of the